Good morning or good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are so excited to be welcoming you all to our MetalCon Live, the first one since MetalCon 2024. And today I am joined by both Adam Verstraete and Joe Menchevsky. And these two individuals are coming from the fantastic companies of Wintech Inc. and Advanced Glazings Limited. Both of these companies are fantastic and they are experts in their field. This session is actually titled Balancing Light and Life, Managing the Connection in Today's Built Environment. And we are so pleased to have these two joining us. I'm also very pleased to announce that our next MetalCon Online is a repeat of one of our most popular sessions in person. So this is going to be the State of the Industry presented by the MCA, and it is a very long list of panel participants, so I'm not going to list everybody here, but we hope you will be able to join us for that session taking place on January 15th, everybody. Sorry about that. We are also very pleased to announce that the MetalCon call for presentations is now open. If anyone is interested in either presenting a MetalCon online session or doing a MetalCon in-person session, please go to the website listed on the screen now and make sure that you submit your information, and we will be happy to take that into account for our 2025 season, and our advisory council will effectively review all education. As a very, very minor note, if anyone is interested in receiving a certificate of attendance, please use the survey link listed at the end of this webinar. That survey link, it's just to get your first name, last name, email address, and a few other minor pieces of information so we can put them onto a certificate confirming that you did attend today's webinar. That way you can get all the credit you need and get your certificate following that. If you do have any questions, comments, or concerns, please submit those in the chat box, which will be live immediately following this intro, or in the Q&A section, and they will be read out to our two lovely presenters today. So without further ado, I'm going to hand this over to Adam and Joe. Adam and Joe, take it away.
Thank you very much, Adam. Why don't you introduce yourself first, and then I'll take over and start the presentation.
Okay, sounds good. My name's Adam Verstraete, as you've heard. I'm with Wintech. Hopefully, most of you guys have heard of Wintech. We are the premier metal building window supplier in the industry. We've been servicing the metal building industry since 1994, I believe. So a long time, 30 years. We're always looking for new ways to improve windows and light getting into metal buildings. Advanced Glazing and us met last year, and we seem to have a lot of synergy together. So we put this idea together to do this presentation. And that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Joe and let him tell you what we're going to talk about.
All right. Thank you very much, Adam. Thanks to everybody for being here today, for making the time to listen. Hugely appreciated. So I work with Advanced Glazings, and I work in the world of bringing natural light into buildings. And what I want to talk about is a really simple, cost-effective way to create higher value buildings. And that's what this is going to be all about raising the value of the buildings that you guys create. This is an AIA accredited program. So if we've got any architects out there, we can make sure that you get your learning credits, and it is for health, safety, and wellness. Before I start, I want to introduce my podcast very briefly. I have a podcast called Better Buildings for Humans, where we talk about the way that, the buildings that we live, work, and play in impact our health and our well-being and our ability to be productive. We're on about episode 70 now. I've got architects, building scientists, consultants. I had Tony Bucco from the MBMA. I had Heidi Ellsworth from the Roofers Coffee Shop, and a few other folks from your industry, from your world on the show. Check it out. It's an interesting program. Now, what am I going to talk about today? Let's dive a little deeper than what I said earlier. First of all, it's about creating value, but creating value, sometimes means adding a lot of expenses. We're not going to do that. We're going to talk about creating more valuable buildings, but staying within, the speed and the low cost paradigm of the metal building industry. We're going to talk about how we can use connection, and I'm talking about connection to the natural world. I'm talking about connection to your neighbors, to your community, to create more valuable buildings. We're going to focus on buildings that have humans in them, right? So, if all you build are warehouses where there's one guy on a forklift, you're not going to be interested in what I have to say today. So I'm going to warn you of that right at the outset. This is for buildings where continuous occupation is a little more the norm. All right. Look, so let's start by saying, why do we create buildings in the first place? It's to protect us from the extremes in the weather and, potentially critters in some places, but usually it's the extremes in weather. What we've come to discover recently, and the evidence is just mounting constantly, is that if we isolate ourselves too much from the outside world, it has a really serious negative impact on our health, right? So managing that connection to the outside world is absolutely critical, and mostly it's done with the facade, right? Now you've got two extremes, both of which are not ideal, right? One is where you just don't put any sort of windows, any sort of openings in the building, and you completely isolate the people inside from the outside.
We
That's
don't
not
want that ever to happen.
we don't want that. And then the other extreme is if you had a building completely made of glass, which we're going to take a look at, which is equally problematic. Okay. What you want to do is get the balance right. And that's what we're going to focus on. Low connection buildings like these, they have a place, they have a purpose. As I said earlier, if you've got a relatively, somebody coming in and going right out, or you don't have a lot of humans in there, it's cool, but they're not very interesting building. They're not a very high value building, right? People, we all know we're being driven as low on cost as we possibly can be when we create buildings like that, and that's what we're trying to avoid, right? Similar, sort of conventional builds. These buildings are not all that interesting. They're not exciting, and they're not all that pleasurable to be in, right? Now let's go to the other extreme. Yeah, I know this isn't a big part of your world typically, but there's a lot of buildings that have been created that are just all transparent glass, right? And they're exciting, they're interesting, they're architecturally interesting, but they have some serious issues, and it's because they're too connected. All right. And let me explain that by showing all the issues. First of all, thermally uncomfortable. We've all sat in the airport and had, half of our face on fire because of the direct sun beaming on our faces. There's no privacy at all. The energy performance is crap, right? It's all, R2 to R3 on the entire building envelope. So it's going to cost a fortune to heat and cool those buildings. One of the biggest issues is glare, right? And that's when the sun is coming in, it's not controlled in any way. So you've got areas that are really, really bright and other areas that aren't so bright. In other words, hot spots, right? And I know these images are a little bit on the extreme side, but they help make the point. We've all experienced that too, where instead of having light evenly spread throughout the room, or throughout the building, you've got spots that are really, really bright, and the rest of the place is not so bright. So you have to crank up artificial light, and you miss the point of having the sun do all the work for you, the free sunlight do all the work of illuminating the space. It's also hard on HVAC systems too. If you've got certain areas that are bringing in a whole lot of solar heat gain and other areas that aren't, then you have to, it's much more difficult for the HVAC to balance all of that energy. So you don't want the hotspots. Okay. Now, how do we end up in this situation where we have buildings that are too disconnected and then buildings that are way too connected? It's because historically we've only had two type of building envelope materials to deal with. One is elements that are completely opaque, right? Which you need. And then the other is elements that are completely transparent. It's binary, right? And when you have those two extremes, you tend to have extreme situations in your design. When you look at all the things that you want in a building envelope material, right, all the boxes that you want to tick, right, we get most of them when we just have opaque and transparent. We get the good views. The opaque will provide thermal insulation and privacy, and the transparent component will add some excitement to your building. But what you're not getting is the great natural light, right? The free natural light that makes us healthier and more productive. Okay, so what's the answer? What we're going to propose today is that the solution is what we're going to call an ideal translucent glazing, right? A glazing that brings in light and diffuses it and softens it. So if you have an ideal translucent, look at the chart now. We weren't getting the great natural daylight before, but now we're getting it because we're getting a soft diffuse light that's going to spread evenly everywhere, get rid of the hot spots and get rid of the pain of extreme glare that just absolutely it is very difficult for our vision to adjust to. We will still get high thermal insulation, and the ideal translucent will also have high levels of insulation. You're still going to get the privacy, and you're going to have a more beautiful building, and a more functional building, which is going to sell for more. Okay. You can actually get there with just transparent and translucent glass together, right? Because the translucent, the ideal translucent, has such high levels of insulation that you'll actually be able to meet building codes now with just the two types of glass. Probably not where we're going, but I want to point that out. Look at a couple of examples. The image up in the right-hand corner, probably typical of a lot of the work that you folks do. It's an ice rink, a skating rink. The entire place is being illuminated for free with 6 feet of clear story around the perimeter because the translucent is spreading the light evenly. Translucents and transparents together. How do you keep the blinds off the windows? You do it by making sure that the space is bright enough that the light that comes in through the transparent part is not going to be in contrast with the overall light level in the space. So they work together beautifully, transparent down where the people are to look outside, right? This would be like a reception area or something like that. And then at the top, you've got the translucent, which is your source for the natural daylight. All right. Translucents glow at night. So if you're situated in an area where like a car dealership or something like that, you want it to be a beacon. So the light exiting through a translucent is also diffused, and it can create this sort of lantern effect or a Sogia screen effect that will draw people to your building. Like this Volvo dealership below, we do a lot of Volvo dealerships, and not only are they using the translucent to show off the location of their dealership, it's also being used to frame the views. Now, most of it has a very high insulation value, right? So they're not losing anything by having the light come through there. But what they do is they put the transparent in exactly the right spot to highlight the particular vehicles that they want to show off at any given time. And here's a shot from the inside. Again, it's being used in combination to show off the vehicles. But what I really want to show here is how nice and evenly distributed the light is in there and how comfortable it will be to be in that space. Okay. So what's an ideal translucent? How do you decide what is the best thing to put on your building? Let's look at 4 of them, and we're going to then do an evaluation of the 4 of them. We're going to look at acid etched glass. We're going to look at white laminate glass. We're going to look at your sort of traditional legacy FRP plastics. And we're going to look at what we believe is the answer, the glass-based translucent. Okay, and we're going to evaluate each of them against 3 criteria. The first being insulation value, right? The second being the ability to diffuse light and then eliminate glare, and the third being the ability to last for a long time. Okay. Now, let's talk insulation. If you want to get away from that 30% window to wall ratio, which is a prescriptive code, and just get to a performance code, right? So it doesn't matter how much window is there, then you need to get above a certain level of insulation value. You're not ever going to get there with a traditional IGU, vision glass, acid etched, or white laminate. You have to move to something that has a higher level of insulation. Okay. Now we're going to talk about the ability to diffuse light, to eliminate the glare, to eliminate the hot spots. All right. And I'm going to introduce a new idea called light diffusion power. Was there a question? No. Okay. Sorry. Straight sunlight that isn't mitigated in any way is very problematic sometimes. We all know what's been happening in Dallas lately, and it really highlights the issues that come when you don't control sunlight. Poor diffusion can actually make it worse because you're directing some of that light towards your eyes and actually increasing the pain of the glare. In order to eliminate those glare issues, to eliminate the hotspots, you need to diffuse the light very broadly, spread it very evenly in the space. So let me introduce a simple concept called light diffusion power. All right. Here's the experimental setup for measuring light diffusion power. You take a glazing sample, take your window, right? Shine a light down at 45 degrees. Sorry, first you put an opaque backing on the window and you cut a hole in it. Shine a light down at 45 degrees, right? And then measure around this 180-degree arc around the back, and that'll show you where the light goes after it passes through your glazing. Transparent glass, this first image in the middle here, is doing exactly what it needs to do. In order to be able to see through it, and views are important too, in order to be able to see through it, it cannot change the directionality of the light at all. So the light's coming down to 45 and it all strikes at minus 45. Perfect. Except for when it comes to glare, right? Because you get these bright spots, hot spots as we call them, and the image on the upper right hand corner is computer generated, but it really drives home that you know how you get those really bright spots. We've all seen them, you know, the nice sharp edges on them. Below is what's called a false color rendering. Don't worry about it too much, but what it's doing is being able to tell you exactly what the light level is in that space. So if you're building a building that's, you know, going for LEED or something like that, this can be very advantageous. It also helps to show that the contrast isn't too bad. Let's look at acid etched glass and white laminate glass as well. You can see from their charts that you're only spreading the light a little bit. All you're doing is spreading the light enough to give you visual obscurity, to give you privacy. They're privacy products, not products for bringing in soft, natural light, okay? Look at the way the light actually hits, right? You're still getting that really, really bright spot. The only difference is that the edges are fuzzy instead of being nice straight lines, okay? This is what an ideal translucent diffuser looks like. The light is now heading basically evenly in every direction, and that does two things. As you see in the images on the right, takes away the hot spots. The other thing that's really interesting, and the reason that that ice rink I showed you earlier is so well lighted, is that so much of that light is going up above horizontal. So the light comes through the window, most of the time it just goes down. But when you got a good diffuser, some of it heads upward. And if it goes up, it bounces off the ceiling, bounces off the walls, and it goes deeper into the building. So you can get way more of the building daylighted without having to put skylights in a lot of situations. If you got a big enough, you know, floor plate, you're going to have to do the skylights. But in a lot of situations, we can daylight a really large area just from the vertical. Okay, again, let's review. You know, this is what Vision Glass is going to do. It provides your views, but it's not a good tool for bringing in natural light. Acid etched, not going to cut it, but a good high light diffusing power translucent will give you a nice even distribution of the light in the space. All right. When you get it wrong, this is a school up here in Canada, close to where I'm sitting today, where they decided that acid etch was going to be adequate. And after almost immediately upon moving in, they had to put blinds up and completely cover those windows. So now they've got a big section of wall that's about an R2, right? And they can't see through it. And it's not bringing any light in because they've covered it with glazed area. Doesn't make any sense at all. Okay. Anyway, so we've talked about thermal insulation. We've talked about the ability to diffuse light and eliminate glare. Now let's talk about longevity and aesthetics, right? It's important to think about how long things are going to remain on the side of the building if your objective is to build a higher value building. Okay. Let's talk about aesthetics and longevity in the context of the four translucents that we're looking at. Acid etched, it's glass, it looks great, it's always going to look great, right? Same with white laminate. Some people don't think it's all that beautiful because it's kind of flat, but I think it's just fine. I like the white aesthetic. Glass-based translucent, it's glass. It's gonna look good from day one. It's gonna look good in 50 years. Okay. Plastic is your issue when it comes to longevity. Some of these plastics do an amazing job with insulation, and they also diffuse light very, very well, but they're plastics. Okay, and what that means is the moment they're put out in the sunshine, the UV light starts bombarding them, and you start to shift color almost right away. All right, so let's take a look at that. This is your typical FRP. This is a university in Canada as well. It's easier to get pictures close by. That's why a lot of them are from up here. this is 27 years old. It looks terrible. You look at the image in the upper right-hand corner, it's pretty obvious which side of it was facing south. It's getting, it doesn't just wake up one day at 27 and it's at 27 years and suddenly it's brown. The brown was accelerating the whole time. So again, if we're talking about valuable buildings, it's just not the answer. Look at the glass-based translucent on the bottom here. It was installed just a couple of years later, and I could take you all there today, it looks the same today as it did the day it was installed. Just to drive the point home one more time, this is an actual untouched photo of a project that was done in multiple stages. The image on the left has the glass-based translucent. The image on the right still has the older FRP plastic in there, and you can see the yellowness. It looks dingy. It actually looks dingy everywhere inside of that side of the hallway because of the brownness of the plastic is changing the hue. Right. So again, if you're looking at something, that's going to be close to town, it's going to be a community center, it's going to have a lot of people coming and going from the building, you do not want to be putting a legacy, single-use, short lifespan plastic on the building envelope. Okay. And it's costly, right? Each time you have to do a replacement, it's costly to the owner of that building because you're also seeing inflation. So each replacement is going to cost more, right? So instead of putting something on that you only have to put on once, you're putting something on that you have to put on at least 3 times. And, for people who are interested in sustainability, that's embodied carbon every single time you have to do the replacement. It's energy consumption every time you have to do the replacement. It's not optimal, right? So, summarize all of that. Acid etched and white laminate, they look good. They're going to last a long time. They're not there to help you light a space, right? Plastics, brilliant invention, and they still have their place, right? But if it's in closer to a place where there's traffic, where people are going to see it, and where some pride of ownership is important, you don't want to do that. If you got humans inside and you're asking them to work in yellow spaces, that's not optimal either, right? So the glass-based translucent actually checks all of the boxes on the criteria we just discussed. Okay, that's how we get to the balance, is by adding that third element. The translucent allows you to bring natural light in, right? You don't need to have all that transparency, right? And you don't need to eliminate the opaque elements either. It doesn't make any sense. You can have a relatively small glazed area and bring in a whole lot of natural light without cutting a whole lot of holes. That's the key, right? Get the balance exactly right. And you can create these really nice looking spaces. The image on the left is in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Can't remember where the image on the right is, but you can see which one would be more pleasurable to be in. And then same with when it comes to glare, the image on the left, nice soft light. The image on the right, you're going to be blinded. That's not where we want to be when we're creating high value buildings for our customers. Okay. For the architects in the room, everybody who's survived me chatting so far, guess what? All of you have earned your AIA credits, and bear with me for just a little bit longer. I want to talk about Solera and Solera Wall. And then we're going to talk about integrating it with Adam's product in order to make it really easy and cost effective to get it into your buildings. Now, how does Solera work? You got light diffusion, you got high levels of insulation. Here's how you achieve both. First of all, the light diffusion. We put a glass fiber veil on the inside of the IGU. It's that simple. The glass fiber veil is amazing at diffusing light, and we figured out how to attach it to glass without it ever degrading. Okay, we also have this honeycomb structure, right? Series of little squares in between the 2 panes of glass, and the little squares break up the convection patterns, right? So if the air is not moving between the 2 panes of glass, you get much higher levels of insulation. If anybody hasn't heard of aerogel, aerogel is a relatively new material that is the most insulating material known to human beings, and it also transmits light. So if we can fill in all the little squares from the honeycomb, fill it up with aerogel, we can get crazy high levels of insulation. I'm talking R18, R25, right? So now we're into places, freezers and cold storage, those sorts of things. You could actually bring light into certain parts of the building and not compromise the insulation levels. Okay. How does it work? How do we get daylighting done properly. Let's talk. It's really easy in the sort of broader areas where you're going to have lots of height and you can just put the windows up nice and high, diffuse the light, and you can illuminate a large area with a relatively small amount of Adams windows. But when you're down at floor level, and I'm thinking reception areas are very, very typical, you want the view in many cases, but you don't want them to end up with blinds on the window. So you put the two of them together and you can have both view and daylight. You can literally have your cake and eat it too. All right. So transparent, the light comes down, creates the hotspot on the floor, but it gives you your view. Translucent, right, spreads evenly, illuminates the place beautifully, but you don't have your view. But if you put them together, here's what happens. Put the translucent on top, the transparent down the bottom where the humans are. The light still comes through the transparent and still creates the hotspot, but it's not much of a hotspot because the translucent is illuminating the whole space. So the ambient light level, right, the entire space gets brighter. The entire room gets brighter. And so even though there's a bright spot on the floor, it doesn't look that bright. It doesn't feel that bright. It doesn't mess up your HVAC as much because there's energy already coming in. There's light already coming in, and you don't get this really high contrast, and you don't feel the need to put blinds on the windows because you're not experiencing glare. I hope that makes sense. Okay, and we do a lot of this kind of work where we've got the translucent up high to illuminate and the transparent below in order to provide the views. I'm going to talk quickly about modeling. Okay, there are computer models that can show you exactly what's going to happen inside your building when the sun hits it. Okay, for example, in the upper right hand corner here, and by the way, we do this for free. So if anybody's interested in talking to Adam or you know to put his Solera in WinTech windows into your building, we can model it. We can show you how much area you need and what it's going to look like inside with and without. Anyway, upper right hand corner in this hockey rink, this is the original design. It was all transparent. That glare pattern is not going to be acceptable. It's uncomfortable, and it also will melt the ice in that area. You have that much solar heat gain. Replace it with Solera on the bottom, and that's what the model shows, that the glare is eliminated. The image on the left is an actual photograph of that hockey rink taken from the same angle. That is a massive, massive space, a massive opened area, and it's all being illuminated with just 6 feet of clear story. That's what my point earlier. You can do daylighting with way less window if you diffuse it properly. Okay, this one's a really old project that we did, a library, but it really makes the point. You can see all the light falling on one side, none of it falling on the other side. It's going to be extremely uncomfortable to be in that library. Replace the roof with translucent. You have a nice, soft, even light distribution. You know, it'd be a lot more comfortable to be in the evenly distributed light area. Right, back to the Volvo dealerships. You know, this is modeled with an acid etch window plus film, and you can see you've still got glare spots that are pushing deeper into the building. Look at almost the entire floor space where your customers are going to be is suffering from glare. Right, that is not optimal. Right, this is a very typical situation for us. Gymnasium, transparent glass from floor to ceiling in the original design. That glare pattern is just not going to be acceptable. You won't be able to play basketball there. Replace the top section with Solera. You can see in this simulation, the light is actually bouncing off the ceiling and filling up the space. And this glare is not going to be an issue because the overall ambient light level is so much higher. Here's an actual photograph to prove it. And in the photograph, you can see the light bouncing off the ceiling, something you don't normally see. All right. And look how bright that space is. There is not a single artificial light on in there. And you still have the transparent at floor level so people can see outside. Right. But this stuff up here, the Solera has really high levels of insulation. So you're not even giving much away in terms of your building envelope thermal performance. Okay, two different types of Solera and Solera wall. We're going to focus on Solera today primarily, but I will introduce you to Solera wall. Insulation levels ranging from R3 all the way up to R25. The only difference between Solera and Solera Wall is how you put it on your building. Okay, so let's talk integration. Solera, Solera will fit in sort of your traditional framing where you bring in a glazing contractor and install it into the building, but we're going to show you a better way to do it today. I'm going to introduce Adam again and have him come back and talk about how Wintec has integrated Solera into their framing system and the advantages that come from that. Adam?
Okay, thanks, Joe. I will give a shout out to Bruce Forster with Stewart Berger Construction. He introduced advanced glazing and Wintec, and it's been a good partnership from the get-go. I've been in the metal building window business for a lot of years, and I have spoken to countless number of builders trying just to get extra light into the building. And when I saw this product for the first time, I was like, wow, this really checks some boxes that the builders are really looking for. Wintec specializes in windows for metal buildings. We make a lot of designs for a lot of different wall panels for punched opening applications. Self-framing, self-flashing allows the builder to install the window fast and easy, and you're putting a window in that's made for the specific wall panel you're dealing with. This is a job we did for Art Hance. I think a lot of you guys probably know who he is. This is an insulated wall panel, an IWP. It's our standard InsulView window made for the IWP application. And you can look inside this building, there are no lights on. And just look how much light is radiating in that building. I really liked this product from the get-go. And when I saw that picture, that was one that's really like, wow, that's something. But what really sold me on this product, and I'll tell you this, I went up to Nova Scotia, where these guys, their headquarters is at, and we toured some buildings. And we were touring the power plant of a hospital that was being built near their office. And in that office, there was a set of windows, very similar to the windows above the garage doors on the right. About 12-foot by 3-foot running windows in this. It was a boiler room for the power plant for the hospital. The workers were in there installing the boiler with no lights. There was no electricity in the building yet, and they did not have any remote workspace lights put up. They were working on it just with the natural light coming in through the Solera windows in that room. That, for me, that was the best selling job I saw of anything. All the literature and everything, you can see that, but man, seeing was believing for me. That a boiler is a complicated piece of equipment. They didn't need anything else but that light coming in the window to work on it. So in the metal building world today, we see a lot of windows like these two buildings up high on the sidewall, just to let light in so the workers have more light than just the overhead lights. Our factory here at Wintec, we spent a lot of money about 5 years ago really upgrading the lighting system in our plant. And we have really nice light, but we still have dark spots. Solera helps get rid of the dark spots throughout the plant. So we have versions of our windows that we can put it in as punched openings. We have versions, like you can see, where we can put in small ribbon windows applications, and a combination thereof. We can do a couple punched openings, a couple ribbons, a lot of design options with that. The next slide is one we included. And I won't tell you whose building this is, but this is a perfect example of a metal building that was built, has standard glass in it, and look at the hot spots Joe was talking about. With Solera, you would see a lot more diffusion of the light, and it would be a much brighter space. So there's a lot of questions about this product and what the best application for it is. Get a hold of me, get a hold of Joe, and we can talk through the best application for your project. I'm excited about this project. Like I said, I've been in the industry for a long time. not very many things excite me anymore. This product does. So, and take it away back, Joe.
All right, thanks, Adam. Yeah, I can't emphasize the simplicity enough. I mean, you're literally talking about changing out some percentage of the windows from transparent to Solera in order to achieve these really high light levels. And also you're upping your insulations, right? So it's going to reduce your heating and cooling costs in the building simultaneously as bringing in this light and saving you the electricity on the lights. So the simplicity is just it's perfect for this industry, and it's the reason why we're so excited to join and become part of this world. Let me introduce you to Solera Wall. This is for really large glazed areas, and it's a panel that is that doesn't need any framing at all. All right, the panels click together analogously to like an insulated metal panel, or sorry, an IWP. Right, we have they're thicker panels, and the spacer on the IGUs can be designed with a tongue and groove design so that they click together. Here's a really large job that we did recently, and it's like 13,000 square feet of glass on the outside. Not very typical. This is a little more typical. This is actually works out to be about a 30% window to wall ratio, believe it or not. But look inside the space, right? This is what I really want to drive home. Look how bright it is in there. Look how comfortable it is in there. And you can't the hot spots are absolutely minimal. It's a very comfortable place to be, right? Similarly, this is a high-tech manufacturing operation, and there are no lights on. The image in the bottom right-hand corner, the workers are working in full spectrum natural light. That is the maximum productivity scenario when they're working completely in full spectrum natural light. They're going to be at their healthiest, and they're going to be at their highest level of energy. You're going to have lower absenteeism, lower turnover, all those things that really, really matter. And remember, I talked about the lantern effect, the glow at night, right? This building it's an industrial park, but it's close to like an overpass bridge. So everybody driving by sees this building, and they all know what it's all about and what they're doing there. So, when you're recruiting, very valuable. Okay. That is basically it. I just want to drive one more thing home that Adam spoke of earlier. We are here to help. Call us. We can do the modeling for you for free. We can help with, building envelope thermal calculations. Adam can help with, insulation, and, together we can come up with optimal location of the windows to maximize the amount of light that comes in and minimize the amount of money you have to spend on glazing in order to get to that maximum amount of light. So we're here to help you. Budgetary quotes, all those sorts of things. Call Art Hance, call David Leinbach and people like that we're starting to work with now, and they'll tell you about how good it is to work with us and with WinTech. That's it. I guess now, Kaylin, we open it to questions.
Yeah. So if anyone has any questions, please feel free to submit those either in the chat box or in the Q&A section. So I'm not seeing any here right now. A question I would love to ask both of you is, do you anticipate any building codes changing regarding windows and glazings in the next year to 2 years?
I'll go first. I mean, there's been some pretty intense changes in building codes with regards to windows already. You have prescriptive versus performance route for meeting codes in a lot of places. Prescriptive says maximum window to wall ratios of 30%, whereas performance is just about reaching a certain level of R value or U value for the building envelope. Those are already pretty severe, especially if you're in, like, say, Massachusetts with their stretch codes. It's really hard to put glass in. Now, the good news is that, Solera has really high levels of insulation, which gives you the ability to have more glazed area if you need it. But in a lot of cases, you don't need as much glazed area because the light is being diffused very well. I don't see them getting more restrictive. What I see is more states potentially starting to adopt, extreme levels of insulation requirements, like what Massachusetts has done. But it does, as far from my perspective, I don't see it getting much more complicated or bigger changes other than, you're building envelope codes, either staying where they are or getting closer to Ohio, Massachusetts, where they're relatively extreme. Adam, from your perspective?
I will agree with Joe that yeah, you're going to see more states come on board with New York, Massachusetts. I probably disagree a little bit with him that I think it will get more restrictive. Um, Unfortunately, I hate to say that because it's getting hard to build window products that meet some of the codes that some code officials are asking for. One thing about the Solera product, it does give us a higher R value glass. So that helps us get our products in more applications. So yeah, I think things are going to get better before they ease up on us a little bit.
Does that answer your question, Caleb?
That definitely does answer my question, and I so
Okay.
appreciate you guys sharing that with us. We have no further questions that have come through, so we can actually wrap this up. If anyone does have any further questions, please feel free to reach out to MetalCon or Joe or Adam. With MetalCon, what we'll do is we'll just make sure the information gets over to the proper person and they can answer that from there. But I so appreciate everyone who's been here with us live today for watching, and everyone who's watching in the future on YouTube. We appreciate you being here with us. If anyone wants that credit for today's session, please make sure that you just submit that quick little survey. That way we can get your first, last name, your crediting numbers, things like that. And again, a huge thank you to Joe and Adam, and especially a huge thank you to WinTech and Advanced Glazings for bringing this education to us. Again, thank you so much. Have a fantastic holiday season and a wonderful new year. We'll see you all in January.
Thank you all.
Bye, everybody.